This has been a day of sound technology issues stemming from the morning, but we're very thankful actually that Don Fraser has helped us out and getting things back on track. So, good evening and welcome to the fourth installment of our Kirk 200 Heritage Talks, the fourth and final installment. My name is Shauna Sullivan Curley, and I'm the Archbishop of Session here at the Kirk. As we film each of these lectures, we wish to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of the Mi'kmaq people. As a church, we seek a new relationship with the original peoples of this land, one based in honor and deep respect. I also wish to acknowledge and thank Greg Simpson and Bessie Seeds for providing us with a generous gift of Kirk 200 themed forget-me-not seed packets. And there are some on the table on the way out if you wish to avail yourself of them. So this evening's talk will begin with Dean Scott and John McFarland speaking on the mission and outreach of the Kirk in the early years and setting the stage for Amanda Henderson Bolton to speak on the Kirk's community work in the time that she's been with us and also with hopes and plans for the future. Looking at the audience, I know that many of us know these three fine people, but I'll give you some background on them. Because there's always things about people that we think we know, that we don't in fact know. So Joan has an education degree from the PEI, and in 2019, she retired after spending 31 years as an education specialist in youth and adult custody programs with the Department of Justice and Public Safety. During her career, she received both the Canada's Literary Educator Award and the Council Federation Literary Award for her work with offenders. She's an active member of the Rotary Club of Charlotte and serves as the board secretary for the Rotary Club of Charlotte and the Literacy Foundation and as the club's Older Generations director. Joan is the coordinator of cruise ship heritage tours here at the Kirk, and she has been visiting thousands of visitors a tour of the Kirk. He is a graduate of Mount Allison University and St. Francis Xavier University and has been involved with the Kirk since the mid-1970s. He helped organize the Kirk History Project in the 1980s, and much of what we have heard of this series has come from Ian's work. Ian worked in the public archives as executive director of the PEI Museum and Heritage Foundation, and then continued working with the provincial government until his retirement. He is a potter and works in the family business, Village Pottery. He is a long-time public figure and very active in the life of the Kirk. Reverend Amanda has been our minister for about 12 years. Born and raised in rural Nova Scotia, she is a graduate of St. Stephen University, Arcadia Divinity College, and Presbyterian College in Montreal. Amanda is married to Chad Bolton and is the mother of two active little boys, Grayson and Thea. She loves reading, crafting, and East Coast summers. A gifted preacher and a compassionate and empathetic pastor, we are blessed to have Amanda as our leader here at the Kirk. Please join me in welcoming Joan, Ian, and Reverend Amanda.
The internet is somewhat separated that kind of stands out as a historical figure. A lot of people don't know much about him. So we're going to tell you a little bit, for starts, about Dr. John Mackison. If you look at the house that is in the picture, you perhaps recognize it. It's on Connell Street, across the street, and it's very close to the Kirk. It's set back from the street. The fancy gate is no more, but the house basically looks the same. And that was his home, and a house that has continued to be a family home. There's a young family now that just moved in recent months, and so it's lovely to know that that house continues to be a downtown home for Dr. Henry. So Dr. John was born in Scotland, trained in Edinburgh, and he graduated at the University of Glasgow in 1815. He's considered to be a product of the Great Scottish Enlightenment, and medical training was at a very high and advanced level for the times in Scotland, in which they actually taught students with cadavers and not just in sort of theoretical books. So it was a unique form of training that was known to be the Scottish medical training system. He practiced in Liverpool before immigrating in 1821 to the island. He lived in Charlottetown, and his practice was really a Queen's County practice. And within a few years of arriving here, in 1830, he married Matilda Brecken. And she was the daughter of a merchant and assemblyman, Ralph Brecken. And through that marriage, John became connected with the Macdonalds that were nowadays, the politically prominent Havilands, and the shipbuilding chiefs. All families that were active in business and often politically connected. Mackison was appointed to a number of official positions, as was the custom of the day, which a person would hold several posts. In 1833, he became health officer for the Port of Charlottetown, serving until 1851, and in 1848, he was appointed Surgeon General of the militia. He was also medical attendant to the jail. Other activities were as a medical examining officer for New York Life Insurance Company, and he was an elder of the Kirk. His work included being medical superintendent, also of the lunatic asylum, as it was called, which opened in Charlottetown in 1848. That was on the right shore. What is the North River system. For the next 26 years, he practiced zealously for the mentally ill, as it's described. Although he had was paid little, and his efforts were hampered by crowded conditions and limited resources. His humane and enlightened attitude towards the treatment of patients is shown by his providing them with facilities for physical exercise, setting up a small library, and allowing them all the liberties their condition will permit. Despite the lack of space, which he warned would cause the institution to become a place of detention rather than cure, Mackison maintained that the proportion of recoveries he attained was greater than that of similar institutions in Britain and the United States. Year after year, he petitioned the legislature for additional space, adequate heating, and recreational yards. Although some of his requests were made, that for adequate accommodation was not. And as late as 1873, he deplored the fact that a proportion of the patients are obliged to be entombed in the basement of the building. The following year, a grand jury strongly criticized the asylum, citing cases of inmates confined in unsanitary underground cells. And Mackison and the keeper, Richard Ridley, were indicted for malfeasance brought to trial, but no persecution was pursued against Matheson. He was nevertheless forced to resign in July 1874. Although this event was unfortunate after Matheson's years of devoted service, it was a key factor in getting action on the construction of a new asylum following. Money for construction costs was approved by the legislature in 1876, and the new building was completed in 1880. Although no longer superintendent, Matheson retained his interest in the institution, visiting as late as 1884 when he was 89 years old. Matheson was also active in other areas of medicine. In 1856, for example, the chairman of the Prince Edward Island Medical Association successfully petitioned the Assembly for an act that set standards for the medical profession and prevent unqualified persons from practicing. His awareness of proper medical procedure is best shown by the detailed records he kept, including his manuscript sketches of medical and surgical cases, which describe symptoms and methods of treatment. In 1878, he wrote a 488-page manuscript, a formulary of medical and surgical prescriptions. It was never published, as far as we can tell. There's only one copy known, which served as a prescription reference for practitioners and included quotations from leading medical authorities. Matheson's two manuscripts portray a man of inquiring mind, both studious and precise. His diary, which kept for almost 35 years, and is in the archives, indicates that as well as being a skilled physician, he was a well-rounded man with kindly humor and a zest for life. And it's really several researchers, the author of this book, on him, which is Edward Shepard, was living in Charlottetown at the time he wrote it. Dr. Gordon Lee also published a smaller book a number of years before and had access to all of his records. And Irene Rogers wrote the definitive biography for the dictionary of Canadian biography, which I've drawn on. John and Matilda had two boys and two girls that did survive to adulthood. John himself reached the age of 90. While many doctors treated the sick, he was unique in his documentation of his cases, and that other doctors referred unusual cases to him. Reading his documents and the state of medicine at that time was actually rather scary. Bloodletting was a major technique which was still being used, and he continued it, although it had already been documented that it was an adverse method. Death was all too common in the era before antibiotics, and no hospitals and no operating rooms. Yet he was a surgeon without an operating room, and an obstetrician. Yet he did play this role of bridging from that very primitive time to the era in which, when he died at the age of 90, Charlottetown had a modern medical hospital and two medical hospitals. So he was a bridge. But I think besides living across the street from the Kirk, he was very active in the life of the Kirk for 27 years. He's remembered locally for his service to the poor and those who could not afford to pay for a doctor. He would see them anyway.
Move this so that we're not blocking the slides. I have my, okay. All right. We learned it for last. So we can't talk about mission and outreach in the Kirk without talking about the women. From the founding of the congregation in 1825 to the beginning of the Second World War, there were actually 3 women's groups. They operated independently, but they collaborated on various interests and events. And unfortunately, we have very little written information before 1900. A quote from Jessie Fullerton in the introduction to this 1977 book, The Women of the Kirk, sums it up. Ever since the inception of the Kirk of St. James 150 years ago, the women of the Kirk have been a tower of strength in every facet of its endeavor. They possess a record of great achievement. They have, on many occasions, undertaken tasks which seemed insurmountable and have come through victoriously. So starting in the beginning years of the congregation, we had the Women's Missionary Society, the Ladies' Aid, and the Guild. Now, the Women's Missionary Society promoted Christian education in adult and youth groups at home and abroad. The first, you may remember that the first organized Presbyterian congregation in PEI was formed at Princetown in Walpack in 1791. And in 1825, the same year, the Kirk became the Kirk. 6 women from that congregation formed the Princetown Female Society for the Propagating of the Gospel and Other Religious Purposes. And this was the very first missionary society in Canada. In 1886, following the example of these women, an auxiliary of the Walpack organization was formed at the Kirk. Next slide, please. The society began working through their missions with women in Trinidad, British Guyana, and later Korea. They had something called the Little Jewels Mission Band, and they sponsored a number of girls, most of whom they referred to as Dorothy, and it shows up in the minutes and annual report. Money was sent to little Dorothy. But it goes for years, so I don't think it's the same little Dorothy. I think that was just what they called her. And after World War I, when immigrants were flocking to Canada, the Presbyterian dog worker in Halifax was able to provide the necessary clothing and other worthwhile articles provided by the St. James Mission Society. So remember, everybody was pouring into Pier 21 after World War I, and so the women of the Kirk made sure that they had clothes and other necessities. Next slide, please. The next society we may have heard of, I talked about them last year. They assisted in financial matters in connection with alterations and improvement, as well as with expenses and debt reduction. So they're first mentioned in 1851 when they were thanked for purchasing the bell. The Ladies' Aid raised funds through bazaars, teas, and fancy sales, usually held at Easter and Halloween, and they held a rummage sale 4 times a year. During World War II, the Halloween tea was canceled several times due to food rationing. The 1935 session report states, the Ladies' Aid Society has shouldered a heavy burden during the past year and has worked harder than ever and has been behind in no good work. In 1934, the Ladies' Aid succeeded in having the kitchen totally remodeled. The Ladies' Aid and the Guild, which is the third group, often collaborated on events. So the main focus of the Guild was community involvement, and they often collaborated with the Ladies' Aid on purchases like kitchen equipment. And in 1903, their committees included the literary, social, historical, and biblical. It was said that they thrived on the service. And in 1904, they decided that one of its functions would be to carry out work that stressed character building. In addition to collaborating with the Ladies' Aid, the Guild raised funds through chain teas, and I haven't figured out quite what that is, cookery sales, and flower sales. One Christmas during the First World War, they sent 60 boxes containing necessities, sweets, and smokes to our lads in France. And in 1917, the SOS came from the Red Cross for socks to be sent overseas. The Guild provided 180 pairs in record time. They took a keen interest in educational matters and students, and they sponsored numerous lectures by well-known speakers and specialists, and some of the lectures were illustrated by slides which, and I quote, never failed to attract a large audience. And if you remember last time, the trustees in the 1890s approved the purchase of a magic lantern to improve the outreach of the Kirk. So I'm wondering if this is where the slides came from. The members of the guild were also responsible for placing the on rolls on the walls, and they paid for the cost of radio broadcasting. And they were the ones who took responsibility for decorating the Kirk at Christmas. So I'm going to show you some slides now which have excerpts from their annual reports, which I think were quite interesting. So in 1905, the Women's Missionary Society marked the 19th anniversary of the Women's Foreign Missionary Society. It began in 1866. Clothing was sent to the Grenfell Mission, Labrador, and $80 to the Trinidad Mission. The Ladies' Aid donated $1,000 to the Kirk trustees. This is 1905. The Guild promoted social evenings to further the role of the church in the community. And the sewing circle met every Thursday in the parlor in the hall. Next one. In 1919, the Little Jewels Mission Band is still supporting Dorothy. The Guild remembered the sick at Christmas. And the Ladies' Aid bought a new stove for the kitchen with assistance from the Guild. And in 1931, remember we talked about the reorientation of the Kirk? The Ladies' Aid contributed $600 and the Guild $300 to help meet the expenses incurred in changing the church. Next slide. So in 1940, the Guild and the Ladies' Aid merged to form the Kirk Auxiliary. Now, the dates here are inconsistent across references. The green history says that they merged in 1958, but the Book of the Women of the Kirk and all of the documentation indicates that 1940 was the date. So the auxiliary was divided into two groups. One met in the afternoon, and the other in the evening, usually at members' homes, and they prepared articles for the bazaars or knitted for the Red Cross. And during the war, the members volunteered for emergency hospitals, first aid posts, and disaster relief kitchens. And one of these disaster relief kitchens was here at the Kirk. Their first event was a theater night, where the play Saturday Night was presented. They charged 25 cents, and they raised $100. So that's 400 people. So I don't know, I can't find if they had one performance or two. Next, please. So the auxiliary was reorganized in 1944, and 4 groups were formed. See, some of these will be familiar to some of you, I know. Brighton, Central, East, and West. And then Joy and Dorcas groups were formed later. Each group had a leader, an assistant leader, a secretary, and a treasurer. And the group projects included aiding the war effort, hospital assistance, and help to the Ladies' Committee of the YMCA. Next. In the early 70s, the Presbyterian Church in Canada recommended that there be only one women's group where devotional periods and study were included on the agenda. So in 1971, the WMS decided to try an amalgamation with the auxiliary for 1 year, and at the end of that time, assess the situation and come to a decision. Next. And thus became the Presbyterian Women of the Kirk. No prizes for guessing why I have this picture there, and the next one. In 1972, the Association of Presbyterian Women of St. James, the Presbyterian Women, was formed by the amalgamation of the WMS and the Kirk Auxiliary and all its sub-groups. The 6 church groups were kept and activities continued. The Halloween tea was replaced with the fall food and bake sale, and all groups participated. I'm told that each group had their own table, and then there were joint tables, and there was a little bit of competition among the groups about who had the best table. I say nothing. The association pursued both mission work and a variety of initiatives which were designed to support the life and community of the Kirk. Next slide, please. Now, the WMS didn't disappear entirely. It and the AMS are still part of the Presbyterian Church in Canada. Daphne, you might recognize one of the people in that photograph. Yeah. This was, well, they were preparing for service up at Kirk Presbyterian in Malpeque to celebrate the anniversary of the Malpeque Association. So, and unfortunately, none of the women in this photograph have first names. But we do know them. So they're preparing to celebrate the, I believe, 150th anniversary of the founding of the Malpeque group. Next slide, please. How many of you remember the chowder lunches? I have memories of numerous pots of chowder being prepared. An elaborate fruit salad we weren't allowed to touch. Rhubarb punch. The dining room table covered in fabric as she turned out aprons and casserole covers and teddy bears and tea cozies. And I'm sure the same could be said about many, many dining room tables then and now. She made dozens of these. They have a little music box in them. And they're all over the place because everybody wanted them for their new grandchildren. So I have a bit of mom with me here tonight. Next slide, please. Oh, and she wasn't having any fun in that picture. She not weren't having any fun at all in that picture. And if you want the chowder recipe, it is in the new cookbook. So during our last Heritage Talk, we talked about the windows that can't be seen from the sanctuary, and there are 4 small windows at the base of the bell tower: the rose, the thistle, the lily, and the burning bush. And these were given by the Presbyterian women in memory of the women of the congregation. When Mom died, Raymond Moore gave me a big hug and said she was a great servant of this place. And while I was preparing for this, the song lyric, "We are great workers for the cause, willing helpers in the mission field," for Anna Maples, and I'm going to apologize for the earworm, kept running through my head. And I can't help but think what great servants and willing helpers all of these women were and are. They worked hard. Their faith was central to their lives. Their legacy continues.
We also had many groups, what we would call midweek groups, or what sociologists might call uniformed youth groups. And I think this picture captures an era in which everyone was in uniform. Now, this is the Martin family. Ken Martin, the city Charlton magistrate, his wife Margaret, followed by his daughter Margaret, you know it's Margaret Dumont, and Donald, and the youngest, Elizabeth. They are in front of their home on Ambrose Street, and that home eventually became home to another Kirk family, the Curtis family. Eventually became home to the Dart family, another Kirk family. And you can see a sense of each of them participating in some official activity. You know, in that era, we could say the early part of the 20th century, a lot of people were in uniform. But the rise of youth groups is an interesting phenomenon, and the fact that they had semi-military uniforms and were sometimes deemed to be paramilitary, that they practiced drills and marching and various things. Eventually, those organizations changed over time. But one of the earliest ones at the Kirk was the St. James Boys Brigade. And this had, from the paper of the day, indicates that the brigade is in full working order. As many as 38 were enrolled on Wednesday afternoon and showed great aptitude in drill. Preparations in being made to have 2 companies of 30 each, again, a military term of companies. In one will be enlisted the bigger boys of 12 to 17, and the second will be for boys of 10 to 12. The organization of the Boys Brigade, reflects great credit upon Reverend Mr. Fullerton, Mr. Kirk, who takes great interest in the movement. It is the intention to have the Highland Brigade dressed in Highland uniforms with kilts and Scotch bonnets.
Unfortunately, we have no pictures.
Just to give you a little bit of an idea of what we're not used to boys' brigades in this community any longer. They live on in places like St. John's, Newfoundland, and in a lot of places in the world. Actually discovered that the Boys Brigade goes back to 1883 in Glasgow, Scotland, when Sir William Alexander Smith, a Sunday school teacher, kind of created this blend of religious instruction and physical activities. Military-style drills to promote discipline, self-respect, and Christian character. Today, it is a global presence with a mission to provide a safe and fun environment for young people to learn, grow, and develop in a Christian setting. Smith had been assigned to be a Sunday school teacher, was also a military volunteer, and he sought a way to better engage boys than just his Sunday school program. Combining the discipline of military drills with Bible studies and physical activities to instill Christian values and life skills like obedience, reverence, and self-respect. The organization grew quickly from one company in Glasgow spread right across the UK before becoming an international, worldwide organization in the 1890s. It predates scouting, but has a direct connection. It now operates in 60 countries. It remains rooted in the historical origin of the modern Boys Brigade, offers a wide range of activities, including camping, kayaking, first aid, and sports. Scouting has had a fascinating connection to the Boys Brigade, as it was Smith who encouraged Robert Baden Powell to get involved, which he did in August 1907. When Lord Baden-Powell had a week-long experimental scout camp on Brownsea Island in Poole, America, to test his ideas. He had 21 boys from various social backgrounds, from boys' schools in the London area, and a section of boys from the local Poole, Portsmouth area, who were already in Boys Brigade. And they all attended the camp together, so it's basically city kids, along with these boys from the local area. Following Ernest Thompson Seton's ideas, the boys organized themselves in small groups with an elected leader and learned camping and woodcraft skills. Today, 50 million members in 170 countries is what the scouting movement stands at. It's hard to believe that. I was amazed. It now dwarfs Boys Brigade, which had a 20-year head start on them, which currently numbers about 750,000 in 60 countries worldwide.
Thank you. All right, so while Baden-Powell was creating Boy Scouts, Girl Guides began in 1909 when girls in England demanded to take part in a Boy Scout rally that Baden-Powell had organized at Crystal Palace in London. He was so impressed that he asked his sister Agnes to create a program just for girls, and this was the beginning of guiding. By 1910, the guiding movement had reached Canada, and the first unit was formed in St. Catharines, Ontario. By 1912, there were units in every province, and many of Canada's most forward-thinking women banded together to form the Canadian Girl Guides Association. And what we'll have now, we've had guides, brownies, sparks, as well as the boys' programs through the years at the Kirk. And we see a number of the groups from the 60s. You may recognize some faces.
So this picture, Daphne Large and Daphne Dumont are there with some other names. I'll just read some off. Left to right, Daphne Large, French, Charlie, Daphne Large, Brown, Green,
Brown,
Daphne Stewart, Terry, White,
Brenton,
Mrs. Newsom, Beverly Kelly, Daphne Dumont, Betty Brown, Ken Shaw, Marjorie Kirk, Jocelyn Heath, and Lynn McCann.
and then you flew up. Big day when we flew up from brownies. Next slide. So CGIT, Canadian Girls in Training, was founded in 1915, and it was formed in Canada as an alternative to the Girl Guides and the Girl Scout movement because the founders felt that one was too British and one was too American, so they wanted something Canadian. The initial support was provided by the YWCA, along with the Anglican, Baptist, Presbyterian, and Methodist churches. And so today it's an independent organization supported by the United Church, the Presbyterian Church, and the Canadian Baptist Ministries. And there are about 2,000 members in Canada. In 1922, the Guild formed the first CGIT group at the Kirk, with Jessie Fullerton and Doris Tate as leaders. Now, I was messaging Carol Dobson this week, and she recalls some of the history of the CGIT at the Kirk. And I'm quoting, "There's a bit of the history of the women of the Kirk about the formation of CGIT. My great-aunt Doris Tate was one of the leaders in the 20s, and also in the early 70s, Shirley Mose restarted the CGIT. It was great training for my age group, and I'm trying to remember who was involved. Probably the same group who also founded the intermediate choir and were the backbone of the youth group Dr. Cameron and Eric Green led. I'm thinking the Galloways, the Taves, Jill, who was my sister, Flora Burnett, and me, Carol. The Christmas Eve service began as a CGIT event, and then for a few years the youth group intermediate choir organized it. We co-opted a bunch of our friends from the Colonel Choir and went caroling afterwards, ended up at the Stewart's house.
Reverend Cameron relayed a story to me when he was helping work on the book he did on his memoirs. And he indicated that when he arrived at Kirk as a young man, he had this idea it would be nice to have Christmas Eve service. And he had a hard time convincing his older session, who felt they knew the congregation quite well and knew that Christmas Eve was a time when basically spent with family and friends, or a little bit of visiting with family and friends. And getting people out to go to church on an evening, maybe of high festivity, might not be the easiest thing to get. And but anyway, this young minister, John Cameron, they did agree that he could go ahead, and he started to have the sense that they thought that he'd learn the hard way. But he went ahead and with a group of young people just described, as Harry Dawson has indicated, the young people provided the leadership, provided the music, and the enthusiasm of the congregation has continued to grow in the years since. It's become a highlight of the year for many Kirk families.
to light candles, and the fire chief and the fire marshal were both members of the congregation and said no.
So scouting became a big part of the Kirk. We've had all 4 levels of scouting at various times. From the newest level was the youngest, the Beavers, which was an organization that developed in the late 70s for boys 5, 6, and 7. Cubs and Scouts have been the 2 main for sort of junior and senior boys. And so this shows in 1958 the 3rd Charlottetown Scout Troop. We had the 3rd Charlottetown Cub back here as well. And we had a Sea Rover group. So the Rovers is the sort of senior level beyond the age of 17, 18, and often for boys that are out of school, maybe working. So some pictures from over the years. Sunday school has got to have been the biggest group activity that we have ever held in the Kirk. It gives you an idea of what a Christmas concert looked like in the old hall. So this is 47, viewing as though you walked in the hall, looking towards the parlor. So the woodwork has been changed. It's looking from the window end towards, looking inward. And Santa Claus is joining the group, and we have the names of quite a number of these individuals, but just an indication of the scale of some of the groups at one time. Through the 1990s, again, indoor and outdoor activities centered around the Sunday school and Sunday school picnics. In any organization, groups are a key part. Whether those are weeknight groups or they are groups that are involved with maintaining the organization. And within the Kirk, we've had 3 main groups that have been focused on the operations. They are section elders, trustees, and management committee, sometimes called stewards. Currently, we have the 3. Trustees are actually the 3 names that own the building. The management committee, with its property subcommittee, looks after details more financial and related to a lot of activities. And that session is involved with a wide range of activities. We have a wonderful collection of our session over time. And what showed you, the same way we kind of did a roll call of ministers last time. And we start with black and white, and I want you to keep a keen eye for any changes as we go through. So the thing to notice in this one, it is black and white, but what do they all wear? Morning suits. That was a big thing when you became elected an elder. You had to get a morning suit. Because most people didn't have one for their daily wardrobe. It was an older fashion at that time. Tux and tails were regularly called, but it was the tails part of a suit tux. And so getting a morning suit was part of our joint session. So 46, again, and we're still 46 and 47. Now, 53, do they have that? That's a good question. They're sitting down, and I think they're on. Yeah. It's businessers. Black and white, still all male. Getting to be a larger group by 65. And some younger men. 76. Not all wearing dark suits. Some wearing lighter colored suits. A little bit more hair. Again, some younger faces and about the same size group. Big change. And anybody spotted bars, only bars. We're living color now, 86. And we have not only a female elder, we also have a female minister, Dr. Susan Lawson. We've done another 10 years, and we have, I think it's 4 female elders and a female clergy person. And I think I counted 7 female in 1998. And we jump ahead. There are 3 males. So some of the things that in more recent decades have been the sign of fish. The upper room, the soup kitchen, our involvement with chances, and our involvement with faith in action. The needs of those in distress remain a reality as it was in the times of Dr. Mackison, but times change. The methods of helping emerge. Newer methods of helping emerge. In 1972, the Kirk was involved with other churches establishing the first toll-free helpline for those facing a mental health crisis or a dark time in their lives and didn't know where to turn. The system required equipment, coordination, and volunteers to staff phone lines, and thus was born the Sign of the Fish. By 1979, just 7 years later, the crisis line had responded to its 10,000th call. By 1987, other systems for crisis intervention existed, and after 15 years of operation, the system was made to pause. It played a key role for that 15-year period. I wondered in researching this topic if there was any historical documentation online tell me more about the sign of the fish. Only to learn when I searched that sign of the fish, AI tells me in Charlottetown, likely refers to the symbol of some mutual road sign, which features a fish inside the cabin. The symbol is used to denote the farm market and is part of a unique system of PI road signs that can be confusing to tourists. The Ever-Round Hospitality Industry, likewise, is a local initiative that has involved many churches, as well as individuals and service clubs, offering both hot meals and groceries. The Kirk has continued to supply both food and volunteers to serve on a rotational basis in providing hot meals to hungry and lonely people in the community setting. Chances, which means caring, helping, and nurturing children every step, is a nonprofit charitable organization that exists to provide a range of child development and parent supports to children from 0 to 1 year to 11 years and their families, particularly those experiencing additional life challenges. The Kirk was involved with assisting in an initial program for mothers and their children that created Chances and became the foundation for the organization to grow. We were pleased to house Chances daycare within the Kirk upper and lower halls for many years. Faith in Action was a program initiated during the years the Reverend Jeff Ross was here. It involved a series of service events over a week that involved volunteers from the congregation, including conducting worship services in nursing homes, helping elderly people with gardening and purification of street corner gardens, and doing some necessary jobs around the Kirk. Culminated with a Sunday service and celebration. It was both a community-building event as well as a focus on the needs of the larger community around us. We want to extend our thanks to all of those who have contributed in any way over the past 200 years, and also turn this over to Reverend Amanda for a focus on our recent activities in the Kirk today.
So while I'm speaking, there's just going to be a slideshow of pictures clicked through from our 200th anniversary that were collected over the year. So they're going to cycle through as I speak, and oh my goodness, John Cameron. So the information from Joan and Ian is invaluable. It outlines the incredible work and the ministry that the Kirk has been part of on the corner of Bonnell and Fitzroy for the last 200 years. And I've said it before, but I often picture the life of a church like a stream or a river. And when a minister comes into the life of a church, they're stepping into that stream. And so there are beneficiaries of all who come before them, and more than anything, we hope that there's a life after you're done there. And so I'm here to share with you some of what we've been up to over the last 12 years I have been here, and then looking forward. So shortly after I began here, it was decided that an aged building audit should be done. We have a beautiful church here, but anything over 100 years old probably needs some work. So we did do that, but whenever you undertake something like that, you can never be sure what you're going to find. You can't control the outcome, you just have to do it and you act in faith. So to be a good steward of what we've been entrusted, we do these things. And fear of the unknown is really hard. Over the last number of years, I've been working with the Congregational Life Committee of our presbytery. And that has included work with a number of congregations with really complex problems. There's never a one-size-fits-all approach. But one thing that I've always deeply appreciated about the people of the Kirk is their willingness to consider circumstances and try to be proactive in their responses. So after the Coles report came back in on the building and the work, and the price tag had some sticker shock, at least for me, I get squeamish of anything with more than 2 zeros, we decided we needed to do a little bit of work. So we came back to the congregation with options. Do we simply continue as we are, knowing that eventually we're just going to run down and that will be our time? Do we amalgamate? Do we sell the building and move and build somewhere new? What do we do? Well, with the help of a group called Campaign Coaches, we figured out what might be possible in such an undertaking. And then through conversations with the congregation and looking at our options and roundtable discussions, we decided we were going to take a leap of faith and do a capital campaign. However, and I think this is vitally important when you look at churches and what they're doing. The Kirk surprised me in the best way possible, because they decided, yes, we want to do a capital campaign, but we only want to do a capital campaign if we also do work around congregational renewal. Because the only reason we fix up a building is because it is a home for a congregation, a living, breathing congregation that goes out into the world. So, there were meetings. There were a lot of meetings. But through it all, it was actually a joy. As we heard from the congregation, as we heard why it was important to them, this idea of family and home became very prominent. People said, for various reasons, and a lot of them were John Cameron, that we found a home here. So that kicked off a number of things. We launched our campaign to work at the church building, and then we started the Beginnings program, which looks at congregational renewal. And all the work and all the meetings were moving slowly but surely until 2020. Just as New Beginnings got through the early meetings and was preparing to fully have their big celebratory launch, COVID hit the week before, and everything shut down. And for those years, and it's almost hard to think back on Richard now, but for those years, we had 1 year with some very tight restrictions, and then another year where it took a lot of time for things to even begin to look recognizable. So COVID forced us to think through church and how we did things. We can no longer meet in person, and community is a major part of our faith. It's a huge part of who we are. So how do you reach out? How do you keep in touch? How do we not lose momentum? So you really had to pivot. Phone calls, offering help with groceries or picking up medication for those who are immune compromised. We had online services, social distancing, mask wearing, cohorts, bubbles, limited space. And to go from that time into this time, again, it's almost hard to imagine what we went through and how we did things. And some of the most memorable moments were after all of that, getting to come back and sing in person together for the first time, or to have the first potluck together, and setting up the first game afterwards, and realizing how much we missed our community and being together. So since then, we have relaunched new beginnings. We have identified our areas of potential work around food security, seniors, and supports for the vulnerable. We reached a point during our last session meeting where someone said, it has been enough talk and it is time to act. And they're right. So we will prepare to launch some things in January. And we hope that they will succeed. Some things might not, but that's part of taking that leap of faith and seeing where it goes from there. Work continues on the buildings. You never know when you're going to show up and another door is going to be on. We lost one this week. We didn't even realize. And then, under the love and guidance of David Robinson, our Sunday school began to blossom. Our church space is now full to capacity throughout the week. We have puppy training, seniors yoga, seniors college classes, choirs, bagpipe practice, piano lessons, sword fighting, and tea company. Narcotics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous, Children of Alcoholics Anonymous, Art and Yoga, French Festival, all call this place home. We've become a little community hub here in the corner of Hong and Fitzroy. We've thrown our support behind housing and supports for people during extreme weather events. Our prayer box offers low barrier supplies for the unhoused, depending on the season. And our prayer box collects the prayers of our community. And that interests us when we're looking at how we can reach out. The upper room, Salvation Army Christmas Hampers, Presbyterian World Service and Development, Special Appeals, UPEF Food Bank. We are willing to offer support within our community wherever we are able. And it doesn't mean that we always have the answers. I really wish we did. That would be fantastic. But there are things we wrestle with at our session meetings even now. And we wonder, how can we do this better? Things have changed over the years. We had elder sisters. We no longer have elder sisters. So how do we check in on those? How do we engage people as they come into the church? What are the needs? How do we welcome? These are all things that we keep working on because, again, a community never stops growing, moving, learning, or changing. And where will that lead us? Oh man, I sat at my desk for a while with this question. Well, looking back at the last 200 years, we've been celebrating as a community that has taught me anything. It is that it is almost impossible to know. Sometimes life quietly sweeps along, and sometimes there's major upheaval. Sometimes even on global levels. When we look at 200 years, and all they went through, world wars, and the Great Depression, and the 1918 food pandemic, and electricity, and modern farming, like all of these major changes what we do is we reach out into the community that surrounds us at that time. And that's what this church has always done so beautifully. I am certain that when the sign of the fish first started, they never thought they'd answer the 10,000 call. That when they helped refugees come from other countries, when they went to for their lives. Or any of the countless things where the Dorothy's and the ways that they've helped that we don't even get to see the results of. The church is a living, breathing thing, and it's never static, and it's hard to know where God might be next. And the challenge as a church is to have the eyes to see and the hands to work, and the hearts to respond when God calls. And I know I say this frequently, and sometimes, and I come across this a lot when I work with churches through congregational life, is that there's this feeling that the best days are behind us. But God reminds us time and again throughout our lives that we never know what to expect. Anything is possible. And with God, the best is always yet to come. So I don't know. And, even 20 years, what it might look like, or what our missions might look like, or how we might be engaging with the world. But I pray that whatever that is, the Kirk community is keep answering God's call, being attuned to the world around us, needs of the community, and with love, reach out. To continue to follow in the footsteps of Christ. Give thanks for all of those faithful people who have gone before us, who have left us this kind of legacy of love here on the planet. And I don't know about you, but whatever it was, I'm excited to see it and to be part of it. So thanks for being part of these 200 years that we've been celebrating here. It's a really unique place to get to celebrate, because when we called national office to ask about the moderator coming to speak, they said we don't get a lot of requests for a speaker for our 200th anniversary, but we get to, because of all of the faithful people who have come before and all of the faithful people who are here now. So that's a pretty amazing thing. Okay. This is complicated, isn't it? But I think we have made it work, or others have made it work. Maybe a little bit more of the message that we got from what we heard this evening about and bounce back.
So true. It's just, thank you, Kirk, for you, Ian. You know, isn't that,
It was a bit of a mystery. I just thought.